Welcome to Hangouts on Air by DEJAN SEO. Today we have a special guest, Frank Fuchs from Microsoft. We are very happy to have a guest of this caliber join us this time, and I did promise that we'd have high quality of Hangouts rather than having regular events. So this is a special occasion for us. Frank Fuchs is OSS Evangelist at Microsoft, and he really is a search engine specialist in addition to many other things. So what I'd like to do is introduce Frank and ask him to tell audience a little bit more about himself, his work at Microsoft and outside of Microsoft.
Sure, more than happy to do that. Hi everybody. Appreciate you taking the time listening to us discussing the future of search, or the thoughts about, or the things that I know we're doing about or where search is going for Microsoft. So about my role, this OSS stands for Operating Systems and Services. So I'm if you will, in layman's terms, because evangelist always sounds like a little silly, I'm a technical spokesperson for Microsoft for the whole of Western Europe, and I'm kind of asked to basically speak at conferences or smaller events and reach out to people, founders, startups, educational people, as well as officials of politicians, if you will, and talk to them and work with them to make sure they are aware of the offerings that we have in our portfolio, and make sure that they use ours rather than others, if you will. And that's it in a nutshell, if you will, what I'm trying to do. But it's for me, it's really a dream come true. I've been in the industry since 1999, which tells you a little bit how old I am already. Started out at Bosch in Milan, in Italy, where I built as a web designer, as it was called back then, because one person was still able to basically do all the stuff that was needed to build a website, because they were mostly static. And so I did front-end development for a couple of years, and then a little bit of back-end programming, but mostly was really just front-end, JavaScript, PHP, in the days before Microsoft, obviously, because, well, we do PHP and open source stuff at Microsoft as well. But well, from there on, I did a couple of years of e-commerce at Lycos back then. They were a big player back in the day, and after that, did a little bit of teaching at university, and then got hired from Yahoo to help build their local search engine in Europe. And that afterwards turned out to be, kind of a really lucky kind of thing for me, because they decided not to wait for the US to basically ship the product and move it to the European markets, but rather develop it from scratch on their own. So I got to experience building a whole local search engine from the ground up, if you will, like from the first ideas, through prototyping, through running Scrum teams, and writing product specifications, and working with our backend engineers, with our quality insurance guys, as well as everybody else involved. And that was truly a tremendous opportunity to kind of learn about how search engines are built and how they work. But a really funny thing actually was that afterwards, and that tells you a little bit about how much search engine developers actually understand about search engines, was that from an SEO perspective, we did really fuck it up, because we can't. The structure was built in a way that it was kind of never ending. It would take too long to explain why it was never ending, but the category structure was just built very, very poorly in terms of SEO, crawlability, if you will. And at some point, one of our SEOs, Dan Adcock, came to me and said, I had some local crawler running for 16 days now, and he still isn't done trying to crawl basically our local search engine website back then. And then we figured out what the problem was, and then during that process, I got to learn a lot more about how search engines work, like from another perspective, from the perspective that most of you guys have, like from an outside perspective. And I think it speaks volumes that Google hires ex-SEOs here in Germany as well as in the US. I think they hired an SEO to be one of their kind of spokespersons out there, because for someone to have a real kind of overall understanding of how a search engine works, it's actually, well, you'll find more people outside of search engines, and SEOs understand better how search engines react to certain things changing on your website than the engineers will, because the engineers usually are very focused on, if you will, tiny bits and pieces of a huge kind of system. So I tried to print it out lately, because we have that poster that is called "This is how search works," and I tried to print it out on a A3. I don't know if that exists in Australia as a format. It's probably, it does. Okay, so I tried to print it out there, and I had to scale it down so much that I couldn't read the letters in the boxes. So many boxes are in there, and each one of these boxes are hundreds of algorithms work together. So every time I hear someone saying something like Google updated their algorithm, it kind of brings me up like, I feel like it's not that way. It's there are so many systems, so many algorithms working in so many places, being it data retrieval or alone in the delivery kind of layer, you have a multitude of components that work together to really kind of retrieve the results and then rank them and then display them on the page. And here alone there are hundreds of algorithms working together, more or less good, if you will, but it kind of always, it amuses me to one end, and on the other end, I always get infuriated when I hear something that general, like Google has updated their algorithms, and therefore this and that is happening. So that's it for me for now, I guess. And now yeah.
I remember you speaking about the same topic during the SMX think tank, and
yeah, true.
You made all of us SEOs in the room uncomfortable mentioning algorithms. So we kept saying, oh, Google updated their algorithms to make sure that we're not singling it out. And one of the most fascinating things, and how you got my attention during just a casual comment that you made, is when you stated that somebody who works for a search engine, a search engineer, doesn't really know why this result is on position number 3 and this other result is on position number 2. You guys have to analyze your own results and reverse engineer it to understand why such result is on such position.
And it's for most of the cases, actually, because it's so, like, I mean, there are very obvious ones where like our equivalent of PageRank, which is static rank, and a couple of other indicators will help you to kind of understand why something ranks higher and something ranks lower, if you will, because of certain signals that are commonly known, like backlinks and these kind of things. But as we go broader and the more specific the area is. It's so it's basically so machine driven that it'll take engineers, and it'll need a group of engineers to re-engineer all of that, to really understand why a certain page has gotten the ranking it has, or why it got into a filter for many cases. We have better systems there right now in place, and they're improving it in order to make it easier to get people out of penalties. But it's really that a lot of that is you just can't tell why something is ranking at the position that it does, and nobody at the we on our end don't understand that. And then when I see all the tool providers out there that are pretending to do kind of if you will, experiments that we can't do on our end in terms of figuring things out and testing things and trying to make sense of rankings and all of these kind of things. It kind of well, again, it amuses, but at the same time, it infuriates me, because I think that they charge people humongous amounts of money for these tools, and they pretend to be doing experiments, when all they are doing is basically observational studies that have so many unknowns to them that they are close to being useless. I don't want to say they're totally useless. They can give you ideas, and in some of the cases it's so obvious that they are really useful, but in a lot of cases they just aren't. And especially when they take data from 3 or 4 tool providers together to make the index bigger, and they put it out as an advertisement. That just means that there's even more bias in that core data that they use to then present in very nice tables and structures and convincing kind of numbers that they take to their managers and make them feel good about, like, we're improving here, and we're doing bad because Google updated their algorithm, or Bing updated their algorithm, when in fact it's really like, for us, it's really like there are some instances where we do these kind of things, but then we do it on a very separate, like on a separate box that doesn't get updated. When, like, you could do all of these things back in the 1990s, if you will, because the index was static for a certain period of time, till something like, I think back then we were talking about Google Dance, the days when they updated the index. And in the meantime, you could really do something that was at least somewhat of an experiment, if you will, in a scientific term. But today it's a totally moving target that the search engines themselves can't analyze. And so I'm always wondering, how can they analyze something that we can't analyze? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with your statement, you're making all of us collectively look very silly when we share all these articles and studies. And just yesterday I published one observational study. I'm not going to call it an experiment anymore because it's not very scientific. One observational study, I have to change that title as well, where we have anchor text forced the title tag replacement that was uninformative. So the title tag of the page was literally called untitled document.
Okay.
And we used anchor text from different domains using different participants. And Google's actually changed the title tag in the snippet for the search result. From untitled document, it was saying banana. Literally, we did that. So I think simple experiments like that are still feasible, but anything in terms of what you refer to as a moving target is simply impossible. Now, speaking of moving targets, today's discussion is about the future of search. One thing that I wonder about is whether this is future or it's already the current thing and part of this moving target that you described. One thing that I've observed using a tool that I've built myself, which just monitors volatility in SERPs for Google. We monitor about 22,000 keywords, and we look for turbulence in results. The tool's called algoru.com, and on weekends, holidays, before Christmas, after Christmas, we're seeing big changes. Same set of results for the same query is showing different SERPs on weekends and on weekdays, on holidays and on normal days. Can you comment on this? Is Bing doing the same thing? Is this just an observation, or are search engines literally reacting to user behavior and modifying their results in real time?
Well, we do modify. We do modify. I don't think it's well. In some cases, it is very much real time because you have to act to certain events happening, like somebody dying, or like that's a really bad example, but something very positive happening, and you don't want to have stale information on your web page about that. But as far as I know, and I would need to check back, we don't do anything like scheduled to certain events or dates or something like that. Like that we would change something for the holiday season, or change just something for that. But as I've mentioned before, like in a more longer period of time, US Open at one point means a golf tournament, and at another point it means a tennis tournament, and so it has to change, obviously, the way we rank the results, because at some point the people don't want to see anything about golf because they want to know who won the US Open tennis tournament. Does that answer your question, or
It does answer partly, because
okay.
I'm of the belief that any search engine strives to dynamically modify their results to cater for user behavior. I'm thinking one concrete example. Bing does a better job here than Google. I studied this. I'm preparing an article, actually. So if you search for white girl in Google, you're going to get all sorts of trashy meme images from the Reddit culture, and white girl drunk on the floor and this and that. And that's definitely not what I was hoping to see in Google. I was hoping to see images and whatever else, not meme culture. I went to Bing and I saw books, movies, better quality results, except one borderline pornographic image in image search, which should probably be fixed if it's family safe by default. Now, how I felt about looking at these results, I thought, this is not links. This is other signals sharing. This is the general buzz. Whatever signals fall into that other non-link signals, something's going on there. It's trends. It's kind of like Google serving people what they want to see. And one problem I see associated with that is creating of an information bubble, giving people more of what they want and never splashing anything different. So that's the second question I have for you. Does a search engine randomly mix up results just to kind of like prevent inbreeding of results, so to speak? Do you just randomize slightly?
I think it both is true, actually. So we randomize. We have to, because there's a I can't think of the name, but so we have to kind of because everybody knows that once you're on the second or third page of a SERP, nobody clicks on that link. But if we don't kind of rotate them in at least at some time and give them some exposure, we will not learn if maybe something that's on position 23 and doesn't have enough backlinks, if you will, or other ranking signals, might be a lot better, if you will, catering the information, request that the user is sending us through his keywords that he's typing in. So we have to rotate and change rankings based on that alone in order for us to kind of understand and learn. And for like the example that I was thinking about, and it's been widely published, was a restaurant problem. So it was described in a way that, imagine you're in a town, there's only one restaurant, you have 10 items on the menu, and you'll have to figure out for these 10 days you stay there, how do you get the most pleasure out of eating? The first one is a total guess. You can't read the language, so you don't know what you're eating. It's in Chinese or something. You don't know what it is, so you just point on something, and then you can gauge whether you liked it or you didn't like it, and then make a choice whether to take the risk and try something else or don't do that. But if you only stay within those 10, you'll never know if, on the second page, maybe there is another menu item, number 16, that is much, much more delicious than anything that's on the first page. So, we have to kind of bring in these new kind of sites and try them out and see how the users react to them, and then decide whether or not they should, keep their ranking or get, demoted again, if you will.
I'm glad you confirmed this, because I've always suspected this might be the case. Google will literally not tell us what the case is.
Yeah.
And I've noticed the same behavior in Reddit, for example, where suddenly on the front page of Reddit you're seeing a post with 2-3 votes only, and so that tells me they're kind of giving it a chance. And I think search engines is doing the same, and basically evaluating the quality of their results based on user choices, not on the signals themselves.
That's exactly what you have to do all the time. I think that's the core of, kind of what our neural networks basically do. They try to figure out what is noise and what is signal, and it's very very much like your human brain works, if you will, because if you remember last time you entered a stable, for example, or a circus, you have a sensor that is your nose in that case, and it could be a GPS sensor in another case for a search engine, and you have that stink and that smell, and it reports to the brain, basically something shady is going on. Please check whether or not we have to leave. And then the brain checks with your organs, basically, and they say, oh, no, nothing's going on, everything is fine. And within a time period of 10 minutes, pretty much, that smell goes away. You don't realize it anymore because it's a non-signal. And it's the same thing we treat things like footer links, if you will. We just know that nobody clicks on them, and therefore they're non-signals, and we don't use them for ranking anymore. So it's really kind of very much like your brain works in a lot of cases. Another example being query user intent detection, where we try to figure out what a user is really trying to find, and that again is very much like your brain. Like when you see a piece of chocolate cake in front of you, and the lizard brain, like the oldest part of your brain, will tell you eat it, eat it, eat it, because it has a lot of calories, and then will live longer, which was totally good back in the day, when we were like in the Stone Age, and food was really critical for our survival. But then it goes into kind of a discussion with the other parts of the brain, mainly the frontal lobe, that will tell you, the newest part of the brain, that will tell you, you have your calories today already, otherwise you're going to have to run 2 times as much to tomorrow to burn off all that calories, if you will. And although it's kind of off topic, but the article I've read about that stated that through MFRI scanning, so scanning your brain activity while you're thinking, the decision being made is already evident and measurable in the brain up to 10 seconds before it reaches your consciousness. So your brain has already done what our query classifiers try to do 10 seconds before it reaches your your consciousness. And going back to the search engine, we try to figure out what a user is trying to find based on a couple of instances. And one of the things that kind of explains why being in a lot of cases, especially in the long term, is so much worse, if you will. I'm going to be that frank and open and say than Google is again the usage, because the understanding of n-grams, and n-grams being just a number of words after each other, depends so heavily on kind of users interacting with the search engine. And one very popular example is New York. Like, you type in New York, and then you'll probably display a web map or something like that, and then you add another word and it's New York Times, and all of a sudden it's a magazine. But the search engine has to understand that now it's the magazine that it should look for, and it doesn't has to just stop at these two words. And then you add another word and it's square, and now you have a location again because it's New York Times Square. And for a search engine to understand where the n-gram starts and where it ends and where it has to kind of put the things together, it needs user interaction in order to learn all of these kind of things and to be better there. And that's one of the main reasons why we are kind of struggling, especially in the countries where we have like 2% market share. These kind of areas, our kind of long tail results are really horrible at this point in time. But as I said at the beginning, and I think it was kind of pre opening up the Hangout, with Windows 8.1 rolling out and being so deeply integrated into it. So literally, if you're on the home screen and start typing, it already first it kind of tries to find things on your hard disk because it kind of figures that those are the most relevant to you. But underneath the results from your local machine, already there are search suggestions from Bing, and if you keep on typing and there is nothing locally anymore, it'll and you hit enter, it'll literally go straight to the search results, and they look very much different than they looked in the past. So it's no more 10 blue links. If you look at them, they're you can't even call them thumbnails anymore. They're kind of, I don't know the size from the top of my head, but it has to be something like 300 pixels at least in the width, and probably 150 in the height. I need to check it really, like a screen capture of your landing page. And that is going to be a real important shift in terms of how you have to think about building your website, because search engines already today, and local search being a very specific example, are more and more forced to cater to the human needs of kind of aesthetic kind of things, like aesthetics. Do you pronounce it like that, like things that look good
Aesthetics.
to you? That aesthetics, exactly. As well as all these common things that we know from advertising, like a smiling woman, or professional pictures in a local search kind of profile, will these days more and more outrank what the algorithm is basically telling the engine to basically deliver as the top result, because the users just favor a result that is richer and that has really appealing pictures, is fully filled out with payment options, opening hours, all these kind of details. They like that so much more on a human kind of basis, if you will, and that leads to more time spent on our engines, and therefore we, as much as probably Google, I mean, I can't talk about Google because I never worked there, but they are more and more, we are more and more kind of forced, but I think in a good way, to be more human and to be more appealing to them, if you will. And if you look at how the SERPs look now in Windows 8.1, you don't open a browser. You really just type from the desktop. You'll see that will have a huge impact in terms of how much of a click-through rate you're going to get based on how the results are displayed these days in our SERPs.
Wow, this is really insightful. Like I think I'm understanding that Microsoft is going device integration, and it's not just the old 10 links, and so that's kind of glimpses of what's coming.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you mentioned you draw some analogs with human body and our brain, because I'm sure you guys employ neural networks for learning. You do deep learning at Bing, understanding. Yeah. Yep. Now I have to admit, I am that nerdy that I have an EEG, electroencephalogram, at home, and we're planning to write a little extension to browse the web using your thoughts. But yeah, more important things, more pressing things took over as a priority.
Yeah, I mean, you should come at some point. We'll have to arrange something so you can come and join us for one of the. So we're doing some events at, for example, our Cambridge research labs, and one of the things that the guys are doing with sort of the, if you will, next generation of Kinect. It's not really Kinect. It's much more advanced and much more high definition, if you will. But in the human interaction, and you've wrote about that in your article, there are so many signals that get lost in today's interaction. So I always say that search engines today are like a doctor trying to diagnose a patient via text messaging. So it's actually sort of kind of acting like those three monkeys, like holding your ears and closing your eyes and closing your mouth. So you don't know how old the patient is, you don't know whether he speaks the language well, you don't know his appearance. All these informations are basically lost in that conversation with the search engine today, and that'll change in the future. And some of the things that the guys are doing in Cambridge is, for example, and you can try that, everybody actually can try that on their own afterwards, is that at least in our Western culture, in Asia it's a little different, but in the Western culture, if you meet someone that you consider a friend, for example, or someone that is lower in the social class, if you will, in your opinion, you will greet them with a slight uplift of your neck. It's like a nod upwards. If it's someone you believe is higher in the social kind of sphere, is your boss or something like that, you will much more likely greet him with a little nod. You don't realize that, and the other person doesn't really realize that, but subconsciously that is an exchange of information that is registered by the brain, and we're getting more and more into a world where we can use all these kind of lost signals, if you will, to make search more human and to help them.
Now, Razvan Gavrilis from Romania, the boss behind Cognitive SEO, he asks, "Hi Dan, could you ask Frank what his point of view on no links search related to Yandex, Google tests, etc.? Did they test it? Is it a viable no signal from his point of view?" So what do you say about linkless search engine signals?
I think that given the fact that in for now, for us, it would be very hard to totally dismiss links as a signal to be able to rank pages. But going forward, I think that a lot of the diversity of web pages that we see today will kind of go away, and the half-life of the other signals, be it social signals or links coming out of these kind of areas, is so short that these backlinks will eventually get more and more devoted. They are already today not that important anymore than they have been in the past, and I think that they are probably just maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead. And if you're trying to get into a market, you have to make big bets in order to kind of gain some traction and try something new. And it might work for them. I kind of hope it works for them. And we'll see what's going to happen. For us today, it would be really difficult not to use our web map, if you will, in order to figure out what to index, what not to index, and a basic information on how we rank results is really still what we call static rank, and Google calls page rank, if you will, and that is based on citations, if you will, like in scientific publications.
There we go, guys. We've got a new term: search engine signal half-life. We've got
the thing is that storing these kind of things is so expensive that you just can't, like I've said that, or I probably haven't said it in this round, but on a regular day today alone, through the feed from Facebook, we get about 1/10 of the size of the index we had 3 years ago. Think about that for a minute. Like, we get so many informations, public updates that have links in them, that have location information, that have timestamps, and all of these kind of things. We have probably a lag of about a second till we get the information, and then it takes us about 5 minutes to really index these informations. But in order to really kind of keep them in the index, it'll be way too expensive, and even to store them in our web map wouldn't make too much sense from a couple of perspectives. It's one, very, very expensive to do, and the other thing is that a lot of these social things are very timely in a way, and a lot of them are really useless, and therefore it's not necessarily a very high quality source of information retrieval. So for example, one of the things that the guys always mention is Justin Bieber dies about 5 times a day on Twitter. And so you'll have to make sense of what is really important and what not. In terms of, like, Google always says social is not a ranking signal, which is semantically right, but at the end of the day, we have always been talking about this 15 minutes of blindness, if you will, for search engines till they detect certain articles on websites about current events happening, and you can reduce that blindness by monitoring what's happening on the social end of the site, and combine that with the information you had. Like, for example, the New York Times publishes something about a shooting just happening in LA or something. You get all these kind of social signals pointing to that article, and you know that this is a trustworthy kind of site, and so we will kind of index that page a lot quicker, and therefore reduce that kind of time of blindness, if you will, of our index, not bringing up these kind of information. Now, news was a bad example because it kind of works in a different way, if you will, but it's more in a general way. It's like in the broad perspective. So if you want pages to be kind of indexed more quickly, or to be seen more quickly and indexed and then displayed in search engines, it is helping you to rank, if you will, if you use that, or it helps you to get indexed quicker, if you will, and therefore to rank quicker. So for me, it's still a ranking signal, but then it's semantics, I guess.
I'm really glad you mentioned the vastness of data that you guys work with, because I had last year, I believe, I had a hangout with a couple of data scientists at CERN, particle physicists, and my question was, what do you do with all the data? Because they're pumping through terabytes of information per second once they're. So they said our science is about what do we keep and what do we discard. So they basically discard 99% of their data, and they utilize the 1% that they know that they can use something with. So I'm guessing this is similar to what a search engine has to deal with, is all this fluff that is useless.
Yeah.
Now, we have questions from within the Hangout. I'll hand over the microphone to Jim Monroe if he's there. I can see that he's switched off. Yep. You're with us,
I'm
mate?
back again. Yeah, I just had to take a call. Frank, look, thanks so much for your talk so much. It is just absolutely brilliant. Office 365 sales are going ballistic, or at least they are on the Gold Coast here in Australia. Is that what you're seeing worldwide? And do you see that as a secret weapon for Bing to overcome user behavior?
I think for one, we see that very broadly, that Office 365 and Office on iOS, for example. I mean, I think we have like 8 spots in the top 10 for a couple of days at least, when we launched all of that for free. Yeah, obviously it'll hopefully help us to improve our search engine and the amount of usage of our search, because it's so kind of integrated in the I don't know whether you played with like you can do searches on let's say maps, or searches on the web throughout all the Office applications, if you will, and that again, as the deep integration in Windows helps us to better understand these things like these n-grams and all that kind of thing. So it's more entry points. So you're perfectly right on you're spot on in terms of what one of the aims of getting that out and integrating search into these products so deeply is all about.
Thank you, mate.
Dewalt, spotlight's on you, mate.
Yes, hi Frank. I've got a question. I want to know that if Microsoft is using all the search query data across all the devices, including consoles, and even then now, as you said, with Office where they can search, and then maybe using all that search query data to get demographics and other data made available for advertisers. that maybe want to advertise specific to those type of devices and demographics, if that is happening. And then also asking just quickly, sorry, just also asking on Office 365 if you think you would ever be able to maybe deliver a free version, but then with the user having to opt in that ads are displayed within the applications itself. And then I just want to say, Tony actually said that with the consoles, you know, when somebody does a search and maybe they see ads, because of the Connect, that you could actually measure the response of the faces and stuff and use that data. That's actually very good. So, yeah.
Okay, so the second part of the question, is there going to be a free version? Again, it's always so hard to really realize what I'm supposed to talk about and not. But let's say that there are plans where there will be free of charge versions of a lot of Microsoft software. If you kind of stay away from offers from the competition, let's put it that way. I have to put it that broadly, and can't go into any more detail. I probably overstepped the line already, but yeah, I mean, we're obviously thinking about, you know, making that more, you know, available to pretty much everybody. And Chris Capusella, our new marketing lead, basically said we're never going to be in a position where people are going to exit a Microsoft store hugging their Office package as they do with you know, a Apple iPhone or whatever, because it's not an emotional product, if you will. So and then on the other hand, you know, as you're a Google trainer, as I read now, you know that there are offerings out there that are free, be it from iOS or be it from be it from Google. So we'll have to do something in that area, quite frankly, and see, you know, how we can kind of get other revenue streams, be it through you know, customer support, especially in the like large scale kind of area where we're working with, you know, huge companies. They need a lot of support to get all the stuff running, and if it's integrated really well, if you like, when I first joined Microsoft and I first experienced how seamlessly work can be done if you work in a system that uses all these tools together, as compared to previously working at Yahoo, where, you know, we didn't have a centralized calendar, so I could send out a meeting request to 25 people, and I wouldn't know whether they're free or not, and then, you know, it was a tedious kind of you know, task and amount of time that I had to spend to kind of you know, make that meeting happening with all these people. And now, if you have all that integrated, it's so much easier. And just because I've gone so far off, could you repeat the first question again so I can answer that?
Okay, so basically just in short.
Now I remember. It was about
Yeah.
whether or not we're sort of tracking demographics. Yes, we do, and you can actually use our Bing Ads Intelligence tool. And I encourage everybody to actually do that, because we share demographic information about our users on these devices, and or on our search engine, I have to say, at this point in time. But going forward, there will be you know, possibilities to kind of track that down on a per devices kind of. You have to understand that at this point in time, like I've exited a call a couple of weeks ago and wrote a note to my manager and saying I don't know that company anymore, because previously Microsoft was very much you know, a company of silos, and every silo was basically doing their own P&L and looking like very much inside all of that. And now these things are kind of going away. And one of the effects that that has, or one of the reasons, if you will, is that advertisers want to have the possibility to, do advertising across all our devices. So be it on the Xbox, or be it on the web front end, or be it in Windows, or maybe in the future in Office, or something like that. And they want to have, proper analytics, that they don't have to compare apples with oranges as they have to in the past, and still have to do today. But there is something coming up. They call it, and I don't know how the fuck they come up with these incredibly super easy to pronounce names, but they're called polymorphic ads, or something like that, and that will be kind of an ad format that you provide your visuals and your kind of information to us at one point and in one format, and we can then use that on any of the devices and gather all the information and get it back to you, so you can then fine-tune whether you want to have more exposure on the Xbox because you make more revenue, and the ROI is better for you on that kind of device than it is maybe on a mobile device. And the beauty of the form, there are a couple of different formats coming out there, but one of them is really like going from really rich kind of media, if you will, kind of displaying your product, if you will, but at the same time it also integrates the whole purchasing process and back-end kind of connectivity in the ad itself, so you can complete the whole transaction within the the ad space that you rent it out, so the user doesn't have to leave the current experience, if you will, and in the future you'll be able then to basically say, okay, it doesn't make sense to keep on advertising on mobile phones because it just doesn't work there, but I'll spend a lot more or try to get more coverage on, let's say, the Xbox.
Now, just a time reminder, guys, we have 5 minutes left with Frank, so unless he's willing to lend us some more time, we'll have to wrap up at a 5-minute mark, which leaves us with a few questions, maybe a little bit of time for some other things that I wanted Frank to cover. So what I'd like to do is jump into one final question from within the Hangout, another one from Romania. So Arthur, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep. Hey Frank, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I want to know, can you tell us an important ranking factor in Bing other than content? I mean, what's your advice for users who tries to improve their visibility of their websites in Bing?
I'll start from or give you an advice that I usually always give to people who ask me, what can I do other than building links in order to get better rankings? Because to understand how we kind of develop and then roll out features, the first step is basically our engineering trying something new because they believe something, they can improve something in the ranking signals and make something better. If they are confident that that really works, we might display it to, say, 1% or 2% of all the users. If we see those people interacting with these new results and rankings much more and better, we then take a next step, and that is kind of really users or testers sitting in front of computers and rating search results on a scale much like grades in school, if you will, to kind of verify whether or not these kind of user signals are really important. So again, going back to something I've talked about before, I'd much rather spend some of the money that you might spend on some of the SEO tools today and spend it on doing market research or focus groups and kind of just watch people interact. Like on a very low scale, if you don't have a lot of budget, really just invite people in and give them like $50 or $100 and sit them in front of your web page and let them interact with them and see how they struggle with them. And I had that like very, very back in the day when I was working for Lycos and their shopping engine. We had one of these user testings going on, and I had that user, and I was sitting behind a blind kind of screen, a mirror on one side, and I was sitting back there, and I was the web designer, and the guy wouldn't find the button, and I was like infuriating, sitting there and saying like, it's right there, click on it. But it just shows you that we as we are so involved in the industry and we're so used to interact with the web, we assume a lot of things to be the same for the users out there, which they aren't. And then, once you fix these kind of things, important signals like, time spent on your page will increase. All these kind of factors will then, increase and get better and better over time. So, I'd rather spend more time in trying to improve the UX of your website than to try and find loopholes in certain areas where our algorithms might not work as brilliantly as they should in order to detect kind of spammy sites or find pages to rank them better.
So the practical user experience is an important part of the job.
Yeah, it totally is. It really totally is. And one of the things we really literally did at Yahoo before we even went into, we had a usability lab there. So we did very, often do these kind of things when I was working on answers. But one of the things we really literally did was test it on the postman. So we had a guy who was delivering the post to the desk of the people working in the office, and we just grabbed him and basically bought him a coffee or something and then said to him, now interact with this new version of our page. And he would give us feedback. And even with just one person interacting with the page, you could detect a couple of things that you could scrape out and improve before you even go into usability testing, because you'd be surprised if you have someone who is very much off that topic and maybe not that used to interact with web pages, how different they see the world. And the last example I'm going to give you is that over and over again, even last year in a focus group, a 25-year-old student didn't understand kind of the difference between paid and organic kind of links. For us, it's a totally natural thing, and we see this kind of highlighting of advertisements on there. But for him, it was all the same. So it's really always a very, very helpful and eye-opening kind of thing if you take someone who is very much off topic, put them in front of your web page, and then let them interact with it and listen to what they tell you. It's hurtful, as I told you, as I've experienced myself building that web front end for Lycos Shopping back in the day. But it helps you to improve these things like time spent on your page, because the users will find information quicker. They'll find navigation pauses quicker. All these kind of things can be improved. And it has nothing like it's not on-page factors, it's not off-page factors. It's really user-centric design, if you will.
Now, Frank, since we're on a 1 hour mark, we're kindly asking for an extension because we haven't covered a lot of questions. Are you willing
Sure.
to share
Yeah,
more time with us?
absolutely.
Brilliant.
No,
Thank you
no
so
worries.
much, because there's a lot of interest, definitely. And I sympathize with your story and user behavior testing and all this. I've used Crazy Egg for heat maps. I've used ClickTail.
Right.
And I've watched real-time sessions or recorded sessions of users trying to find things on my website, and I was frustrated. And then I was frustrated at myself for designing so poorly.
Yeah.
Now, one recent event I had was a good buddy on Google Plus asked me to help out, thinking it's Penguin, it's Panda, it's this, it's that, poor links, whatever. I really examined the site and all the factors that I could, and at the end of the day, I said, mate, your website is ugly. I'm sorry. It looks like it's from 97, 98. It's just all over the place. It doesn't look like a modern site. I think you have some usability problems. Good news is he was already working on a next release, and I'm really happy. I was really happy to hear that. All right. Next up, Jim, that wasn't you, but it was somebody in our circle of friends. Although, speaking of your website, you should probably refresh your layout as well, shouldn't you?
Our website's appalling, but also most of the links are broken, but we are so heavily penalised by Google that I've sort of got it there as an experiment as to how far they can push it down. This week, without any improvements at all, we're up 25%. So who knows?
Jim is always pushing the boundaries right there.
Nobody knows. They don't even know.
Probably.
Trust me on that.
The top question by votes from the audience is by Dalen from Melbourne. He asks, what elements of organic search ranking do you think Bing do categorize better than Google and vice versa, and why?
Do we do better than Google and vice versa? Vice versa, I can't answer because I never worked at Google, and therefore it's kind of hard to do that. I think what we but again, I can only talk about what I know, and therefore it's hard for me to say we're better than Google in that specific area. But one of the areas where we made a big step into is entity understanding, and entity understanding in a way that well, when we talk about entities and entities being anything from a bottle of wine to a phone or a living a person or whatever, the streams of data that we have and that we partner with, like we partner with so many different companies, rather than just scraping the data than like others do, allows us to get a way better kind of representation of the real world, if you will, into our system than we had in the past. And today, I think in that engine, and I'm not supposed to call it Satori anymore, but I don't remember the new name of it. We have like 2.5 billion of these entities for which we have a really good understanding. And what we mean with this kind of more of a real world understanding is that language is a very low resolution way of kind of describing things, and today the web or a lot of what is on the web is still text-based. So if you imagine like the chair you're sitting on right now, trying to explain that in every detail, with every screw, with every part, where it came from, where it was assembled, where who designed it, and all these kinds of things, you could probably write a book about it. And it wouldn't be really useful for someone to understand how it would look like in his room, or how it would feel, or how it would fit into the space, if you will, that he's in. And I encourage everybody to check out. I'm going to try and put the link into. It's again one of these wonderful names. I think it's .com, but I can be wrong. To check out this, it's called Photosynth, and what it does, it basically allows you you take pictures of something. It could be there are different scenarios. One is a walk, where you just walk through, let's say, a building like your office or something, and you just take still photographs of that walking through a house, for example, and that is really super interesting for the real estate market, but just as well for kind of if you're selling goods and products, because you take these pictures, and what Photosynth does, if you upload it, it basically builds a 3D model, and if you use a DSLR camera, and if you check the website out, there are a couple of really stunning examples where with just 20 photos or something that we then stitch together into a 3D model of that space, you get a really stunning kind of representation how that place really looks like in the real world, and you can zoom in like up to a detail that you can see a fly that is sitting on the bark of a tree, if you will, if you've taken that. Yeah, that's it's .net. Thanks Arthur for fixing the error. That's the one that I'm talking about. And if you choose in the preview, there is all-time favorites. There is one in there of Mount Everest where they flew over Mount Everest and took the photos, and it's just mind-boggling if you go through that. But at the same time, check out the ones that the users have uploaded, because it's really kind of easy to do. You have to understand that you have to have, I think right now it's like a 70% overlap from one picture to the other in order for it to be smooth. I have to quickly do a break because my doorbell just rang. I'm waiting for a package. I'll be back in a minute. Sorry. Check out Photosynth.
All right. Well, we should be really, really grateful to Frank. He's running overtime for us, 10 minutes now. Are there any burning questions in the Hangout that you guys really want answered?
Well, we should actually take up a collection for Frank for his new job after this one goes to air.
Yeah, I'd rather take it down and delete it off YouTube rather than put such a fabulous guy in trouble. Yeah, Frank and I met each other at SMX Think Tank, which is like a pre-SMX planning session, and I just thought his insight was brilliant and very generous with sharing. So Photosynth is not something new. I remember seeing it a while ago, but I'm sure it's evolved plenty.
It's a totally new version, and there's going to be a app out later, I think this year, but I don't remember whether it was calendar year or fiscal year, because in Microsoft we always have 2 years, kind of. One is starting in July, which is our fiscal year, and the other one is the calendar year. And then at times I get confused as to whether we're launching something in the calendar year or the end of the fiscal. But there's going to be a app coming out that'll help you even more to make sure that the stitching afterwards really looks absolutely seamlessly if you're struggling today. But I've played with it quite a bit, and even with a super cheap Android phone, it was the Samsung. I don't know. It doesn't matter. So I managed to really get a good sense of one of the running routes that I do when I go out running, and it's really super easy. Check it out. It's stunningly beautiful, and if you have anything to kind of show off, be it your office or be it a product that you want to sell, you could build that, and then just simply there is an embed code, and then put it up onto your website, and the people can kind of get a really good sort of representation, and it almost looks and feels like you have a Steadicam taking these kind of pictures, because it kind of evens out. If you're walking through a forest, obviously the surface isn't all completely flat, but the intelligence of the systems allows us to basically even all that out, so you have kind of that feeling of a Steadicam basically being driven through that forest, and it's stunningly beautiful already, and it's still in beta, so I expect it to be even better once it goes out of beta.
You heard it, guys. Go check out Photosynth and impress your colleagues. Something that Microsoft does better than Google. All right, next question is coming from Kragujevac, Serbia, by Branko, who asks, can you tell us something about semantic web and its influence on SEO in the coming years?
So I can tell you, and then we can probably cover two things at one time. With the launch of Cortana, it is getting very obvious how advanced we are already today in terms of not just trying to figure out, but really figuring out.
Sorry, Frank, can we backtrack a little bit for those who don't know what Cortana is? Could we have a little?
Okay, sure.
Yep. Little introduction as to what it is. Yep.
So the next version of the Windows Phone operating system, at its very core, has a digital assistant that will help you in a lot of cases and in a lot of scenarios. One being, for example, to remind you to buy milk when you go home. So it kind of learns over time what is home and what is work, for example, and then once you leave work and you've set that reminder, we match that with our local search information, and no, not like Clippy, not at all. And we match that with local search information, and once you pass a supermarket, for example, it'll ring, or it'll vibrate, or and signal you and remind you to bring that milk back home. And my mother loves that, because my dad always goes to play golf, and after 6 hours he comes home, and the only thing she asked for is basically to bring home beer or water or whatever, and he always forgets about it because he's so into golf, that golf mode in his brain, that he doesn't remember these kind of things. And Cortana does learn these kind of things about you, but one of the good things about Cortana is that it stores all of that information in basically an open notebook, and you can edit that notebook at any point in time. So you control your privacy. And another very important point, and then I'm going to go back to talk about semantic in that context, is that when we're going to launch it to the public, it will be launched with an SDK. So everybody out there will be able to build on that intelligence that we have already in place there. And one bit of that intelligence is natural language understanding. So I can tell Cortana things in a way like wake me up in 10 hours, or let me sleep for 10 hours now, or I don't have to kind of modify my kind of the way I talk to her in order for her to understand what's important in that kind of sentence. I mean, there is obviously some hits and misses, but there are more hits than misses already, although it's still in beta, and it takes away a lot of the the tedious typing and these kind of things, and showcases how we are already in a world where we understand the semantics and do understand human interaction. And going back to the article that Dan wrote about, it's so natural for us, and it has been for so many years, probably millions, maybe even, to basically interact with each other, and the search engine not being anything else than another person, if you will, in a conversational mode. That this is what's going to come. There's no doubt about that.
So, Frank, we're talking about not just semantic search, we're now talking about search engine anticipating our needs and wants and providing queryless results and alerts based on the context, situation, and variety of other factors. This is something that Google's been working on as well.
Sure.
And I remember that IBM is coming up with a offline version of natural language processing. That have you heard about that? And what's your comment on Cortana? Will Cortana work once your Wi-Fi goes down?
It does. I can tell you that, but you should have a at least a somewhat decent connection to the web. Through you don't need Wi-Fi, but a rather decent connection to your cell provider, if you will. And what was the second part of the question? Sorry,
Well,
I need you to repeat that. Whether it works, if it's
well,
not
IBM's claim is offline.
So what I do know is, because it was one of the questions I asked Anirudh, who you met at this council meeting as well, as he was working on IBM Watson or with the engineers who built the Watson kind of thing. He told me about how they use it, because I asked him, frankly, it's a nice proof point to build a system like that, and it had, I think, 18 terabytes of RAM, this machine at the end of the day. And at the time when they came up with the idea of trying to beat the Jeopardy champions, they were at a precision of about 30%, and it took them 200 seconds to retrieve an answer from the system. And they kind of figured that if they had to beat these champions, they had to get to a 95+% precision, as well as they had to do it in under 2.5 seconds. So they had to improve quite dramatically to get there. And to go back to the question, so I asked him, it's for a geek, it's a dream come true to build something like that, but how does it help in real life? And one of the things, or one of the ways that they are using it is for medicinal information. So imagine you're a doctor somewhere in the outskirts of nowhere, if you will, and you don't have all the access to go to all these conferences and read through all the papers and do all these kind of things, and now you have a engine or a computer that stores all these kind of studies that have been made about cancer and treatments and these kind of things. And you have all of that at your fingertips, and, or if you will, voice controlled. You can ask them and to help basically with diagnosing a patient, and all of a sudden this kind of I don't remember the English term for that. It's sort of some parts of the world, and some people in those parts of the world are very privileged because they have access to a lot of information, and therefore are much better equipped to diagnose a patient or do certain things. And now once you have systems like Watson, and use it in spaces like the medical area, all of a sudden that kind of goes away, if you will, because everybody has the access to all this information at kind of in real time, and with all that intelligence already in place, that it will retrieve possible answers in the first 2 seconds, and then use the last half second to basically rank them and figure out which one is the most likely to be the right answer to the question.
Thanks, Frank. That's fascinating. We can't really go any further. I've set myself 8 more minutes, and that's it. We'll have to wrap up. Give Frank a break. He's probably tired of talking by now. I'd like to power through the next 3 questions. One is by me, but it was voted by the viewers. Why don't search engines simply ignore SEO tricks when they detect them? Why introduce penalties? Just a brief answer. Why bother?
I totally agree with you. For us, there aren't that many penalties, to be honest, as there are in other search engines. And some of them are just we're almost legally bound. So one of the things that I always advise people who ask me, what to watch out and what to try and avoid is the Americans, being all that future and forward thinking, are very kind of you're not allowed to say fuck on TV or these kind of things, or they have real problems with nudity and these kind of things. And so if you're not really specifically in that area, try to avoid that, because there are filters in place that will trigger quite quickly, because they are very sensitive in terms of these kind of areas, and you just need to look at their culture in order to understand what are maybe kind of tricky topics that you shouldn't kind of go into. And to my that's why I asked John at that council meeting. I guess I did. If I didn't, I just didn't dare to. Why they even bother, because for me it's just them collecting information to train their algorithms to be even more kind of able to detect spam, because as I previously explained, that we use user input to verify whether or not the findings of our experiments or trying out new rankings or systems in certain parts. We use users to verify that. That is very expensive to do, and if you get user information provided to you, it is very often of kind of high quality, and therefore it's very useful to you. And if it's provided to you for free, it's a good thing. So these kind of things of devouring links or whatnot, that just doesn't make sense in my head, at least. Again, I can't talk about what Google really does, but it just doesn't make any sense if they know what a bad link is, that they just don't either just demote your page and then or just ignore them. I mean, there are there is no reason to give you any credit for that link, but I penalize you for that link. It just doesn't make any sense, and I totally agree with you. I think that the reason why there are so many penalties and why they are kind of working in that way is to gather more information, because it's at the end it's all about information. The more information you have, talk to a data scientist about who's going to win search. They're going to tell you the guy who has the most data available to them.
So crawling is a big part. Does Bing have a spam report page? Asked Jim.
I don't think we have. No, I don't think we have. No.
Cool. Next up is it's a very short question again by Jim. Would IE be better or worse if it was open source?
Would IE be? I think it would be better if it would be open source. In a couple of ways, and at the same time, it would come with sort of the problems that you'll get with Chrome or Firefox or whatever if you use too many of the plugins. So it would be better if it be open source, because a lot more people would be able to kind of build on that and introduce new plugins and features that I love when I'm working with Firefox or Chrome, that it takes a couple of these plugins with me and remembers the passwords and all these kind of things, or ad blocker or whatever. But at the same time, it makes it really unstable. So for a lot of sites that when I run into a problem when I'm using Chrome, for example, if I go back and use Internet Explorer, just because it's so clean, it will work in there. So it's kind of a balancing act, if you will. And I think for us, there has been that decision that we don't open it up all that much to everybody else. But that might change in the future, but I wouldn't have any real details about that, whether or not that's going to happen.
Second last question was from Joe from Melbourne. It's to do with the RoboCop movie, which you haven't seen, so unfortunately you can't answer that one.
All right.
But maybe once you see it, you can ping me back, and I'll let Joe know.
Sure.
I think we have probably just enough time to, I guess, extract a visionary statement from you. The future of search engines. What can we expect to see in the next 5 years? From you can comment. You can comment from your side. Google typically say, "Oh, we don't pre-announce things." But
yeah, well,
what would you like to see?
Well, the thing is, like, as we all know, 5 years is really like a decade, probably, in other areas when we're talking about search. But one thing for sure is that search will disappear. It'll disappear from you consciously searching for something. It will be a much more implicit kind of background thing that is enabling technologies and enabling you to take actions and complete tasks and things like that. But this kind of keyword driven kind of search scenario that we're used to and work with today will disappear over time. So I would be surprised if these kind of destination search engine web pages, be it Google or Bing, will still be in. Well, they might be, but just as much as internet portals are, or web directories are. They'll stay around, but I think that a lot more will be, without you even, needing to search, like actively search, but search being sort of a background kind of thing that, will hopefully make life for us easier. And what I really would love to see is that search will help, sort of equalizing kind of like, we are all living in a very privileged kind of environment. We earn decent money. We don't have to fight and struggle for food, and a lot of that has to do with information being available to you. And one of the examples where some guys really smartly figured out how to use devices for agricultural information is in Africa. They read out the temperature of the batteries that are in the phones, and that changes with the outside temperature, if you will. So depending on the place you are and the temperature it has outside, the battery might be hotter or colder. And as they don't have measuring stations throughout their country, it helps their agricultural industry, if you will, a huge load to better understand what the temperatures at certain times of the years are in certain areas, to decide on what kind of crop to plant in these areas. That just being one teeny tiny bit of an example or a thing where I hope that big data in combination with search will help us to make life better for a lot of people around the world, not just the ones that are so privileged that they have broadband internet access.
There you have it, guys. We're looking at a very exciting future of search engines, very exciting future for Bing. A lot of things are merging, unifying, seamless search integration. We're looking at smarter search engines, understanding entities. We're looking at Microsoft with their search engine aiming to make a world a better place. So with this thought, I would like to thank Frank for his really open advice and thoughts. We really appreciate this. It's not every day that we have a representative of search engine spend so much time with us. So we're really grateful for your time, Frank, and we hope to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And goodbye to all our viewers, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, guys, for taking the time to stay online and to listen to me. And yeah, if you invite me back, I'll be back. Yeah, to go back to.
Thanks, Frank.
All right. Cheers. Bye, guys.
Thanks.